victims. This was no ordinary crime. In Guatemala, a rare find is shedding light on an ancient crime. The evidence points to a horrific massacre in an ancient Maya city, about the time the entire civilization began to fall. Right away, the fragments of shattered bones reveal something odd. It's the skulls. They're not right.
You compare how this forehead is to this one. This has been pushed backwards, completely pushed backwards, creating this the sides of the head to expand sideways.
Compared to a normal skull, this one has a flat forehead and an elongated top. It looks like a strange genetic defect, but it's not. It may have been a deliberate act of reverence. Some experts believe the Maya reshaped their skulls to honor corn. The Maya lived and died by their corn crop. In gratitude, they may have offered the corn god a strange tribute, altering their children's skulls at birth.
The amazing thing about this skull is that it's intentional deformation, cranial deformation.
A newborn skull is a loose collection of bony plates. The Maya molded their babies' heads with planks until they were long and slender. Finding skulls like this raises a tantalizing possibility.
We're dealing with people who were rather well off for that time. The only people who were rather well off that time were obviously the rulers and their families.
Not everyone agrees that the corn-shaped skulls mean royalty. But something else found in the pit offers more proof that our victims were the cream of society. Jade. More valuable to the Maya than gold. Our victims wore staggering amounts of it. And one of them wore something even more precious than jade. A necklace of jaguar teeth. A jaguar has 4 fangs. One necklace found at Conquén had 36, making it required hunting and killing 9 of the biggest cats in the Americas. Buying it must have cost a fortune. Whoever the owner was, he was very rich. And it seems our victims could afford whatever they wanted. They would have had their pick of the best that Conquén's markets had to offer. They would have loaded their tables with expensive delicacies like chocolate, honey, vanilla, jaguar pelts, tobacco, and the sweet flesh of iguana. And they would have adorned their homes and their bodies with precious stones. Jewelry made of jade and mother of pearl, and exquisite feathers, like the tail plumes of a quetzal. Only nobles could own a quetzal feather. If a commoner killed a quetzal, he could have been executed.
These goodies that are coming in, the jades and the quetzal feathers and all of these things, could only be owned by nobles and kings. So they weren't for sale to anybody. You had to be a holy lord to have much of this.
And not just beautiful things. Commoners could marry only one wife. But Conquen's aristocrats had many. They lived with them in stupendous luxury. In a massive 200-room palace, bigger than 5 football fields. One of the biggest buildings in the Maya world. They expected their deaths would be as luxurious as their lives. That they'd go to eternity clutching priceless jade ornaments, drenched with cinnabar, precious symbol of eternal life, and looking forever fabulous, hiding mortal decay behind a magnificent death mask. But when death did come, it wasn't anything like our victims thought it would be. They weren't buried like mighty lords. They weren't buried at all. The strange case of Conquen is getting even stranger. The victims seem to have been the richest people in town. They would have had the best of everything. Plenty of people would have coveted what they had. But the evidence rules out robbery. It appears that their murderers tossed them into a pool still wearing their jewelry. The motive for this massacre wasn't money. So what was it? And now the bones reveal another shocking fact. The victims weren't all men. Some 31 people died here. Men, women, children. And there's another chilling revelation from the death pit. One that suggests this was no simple slaughter. Whatever happened to these people, it didn't end with death. In Guatemala, a 1,200-year-old cold case is beginning to reveal its secrets. The killers and their motive still unknown. But there's new evidence. The murder weapons. Flint axes and knives found with the victim's bones. The new discovery takes the investigation down a very dark path.
What we're seeing is perhaps evidence of something that happened very suddenly. It was evidently very violent, very, very violent.
The investigators have seen evidence like this before. But not from ancient times. During Guatemala's bloody civil war, in Bosnia, in Rwanda's killing fields. Some of the worst mass murders and genocides of our time. The bones of people hacked to pieces, torn limb from limb. Men, women, and children. And now in remote Canquén, they're seeing something similar.
Almost every bone that we've looked at has some sort of trauma.
It's not clear if the bones were hacked before or after death, or why.
We have evidence of a very heavy and sharp instrument, perhaps an axe, something like that, coming through and severing the femoral head from the rest of the bone.
The femur is the thigh bone, one of the hardest human bones to break. It looks like whoever killed these people also dismembered them, and may have hunted some down as they tried to escape.
This cut came from behind. A heavy and sharp instrument cut it through and then broke the rest of the bone. The individual was perhaps already lying prone, out of action, perhaps, and being dismembered, or the person was running away or trying to get away with their back towards their assailant and failing to do so, evidently.
These people probably had no chance to defend themselves from their attackers. Attackers who left their weapons with their victims' corpses, providing evidence of their fates.
It does fit very, very well with the actual wound. This little wound would have been caused here, back of the head of a child. You can see the damage it caused on the inside.
Take the case of one victim, a boy.
This is the bone from the neck. It belongs to a very young child, under 12 years old.
The attackers might have surprised him, but he tries to run away. They're too fast. He has nowhere to go.
This is evidence of a stab wound to the neck. The only way that this type of wound could have happened is if the head had been pulled backwards and the stab wound would have come underneath the mandible.
It would have been a terrifying end for one so young. But even this boy wasn't the youngest to die. This is the bone of a baby.
These are the hip bones. This smaller one is a fetus of 32 weeks, whereas this one is a 38 week.
The evidence in the bones suggests a grim possibility. This wasn't soldiers dying in a war. It wasn't a religious sacrifice. Could it be the extermination of an entire family? If these were nobles, they didn't come to a noble end. But why? And now, at the discovery site, a new find deepens the mystery. 80 yards from the pool of the bones, a shallow grave. Inside, the badly decomposed bones of a man. Whoever buried this man carefully placed a string of beautifully carved shells in his grave. In the Maya world, an act of reverence, honoring only the most important dead. But Maya nobility lay in magnificent tombs. This man's grave